to life. WBISLP 1069, Winterville, Ayden, Grifton, Southside, Greenville, North Carolina.
Motivations with Glenn.
Good day, everyone. This is Awesome Radio 106.9 FM, WBISLP, Winterville, Ayden, Grifton, Southside, Greenville, North Carolina. Also, with 103.9 Rocky Mount. We are continuing our topic for this month, Brain Injury Awareness Month. I am joined with my fabulous co-host, Ms. Jacqueline Collins-Williams. We have a special guest today, Dr. K, who I'm familiar with from the brain injury support group meetings, and she'll be sharing her story. She is a caregiver for her husband, our North Carolina State Trooper, and she'll share that story with you after my co-host introduce herself and introduce Dr. K. Dr. K, can you hear us okay?
Hello, Dr. Glenn. Thank you for having me.
Oh, great. So I'm going to let my co-host introduce herself. She'll introduce you, and we'll start with your topic.
Hey, Dr. Glenn, and our listening audience on today. It's good to be here. And there we go. It's a good day today. Nice and sunny and windy. And so we're glad to be here on today. We're glad for this topic, the continuation of our topic of traumatic brain injury. And we're excited for our guest on today. We have on our show today, and glad to be on our broadcast today, Dr. Patricia K. Reyna. And she is a caretaker, as Dr. Glenn said, for her husband. We're excited to learn some new things about that, and she's going to share with us on today. And so at this time, we're going to allow her to start out by telling us her story and her husband's story of how she came to be a caretaker for her husband.
Dr. K.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today to talk about this important story for Brain Injury Awareness Month. So my husband was a North Carolina State Highway Patrol Master Trooper, and he was investigating a collision on the interstate in 2009. It was November 23rd, 2009, and he was rear-ended at 75 miles an hour, which caused him to have significant injuries, including a significant traumatic brain injury. And he has required 24/7 care and supervision since his injury. Before his injury, I knew absolutely nothing about traumatic brain injury.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure that you know or familiar with a lot of things concerning brain injury at this point in time. Is that correct?
Absolutely. when I discovered that there was nothing in the country for our injured law enforcement officers to rebuild after a significant catastrophic injury, which surprised me. I had assumed that there would be supports and interventions and all kinds of services for our injured first responders once they're injured in the line of duty, and that wasn't the case. And so I believe also that we have to be a part of our own rescue. So I tried to do at that point everything that I could do on my end to make sure that he had a life full of purpose and hope, because I believe because he lived that he deserved to have a life. I believe that for everyone out there that has lived through an injury, if you've lived through an injury, this is an opportunity to rebuild a life with purpose and hope. And I just want to say to all of our listeners out there that you can rebuild a new life after injury, even traumatic brain injury, with purpose and hope and with God's help.
Absolutely, amen. And you mentioned was a former master trooper, and so one of my questions was going to be, was he still actively on the rolls of the North Carolina Highway Patrol?
Yes, he was. He mhm.
And if I'm pretty sure, I'm just assuming, and I didn't want to assume, so that's why I'd rather ask. I'm pretty sure that all the troopers who they consider a family all came together to support him. Is that correct?
Well, actually, what happened after his injury was that, first of all, they didn't realize how catastrophic his injury was to begin with. And so he did not get the care and supports that he needed. He was thrown into a workers' compensation system that was very difficult to get care in, and you have to really fight for your care there. And he didn't really have the support from his department either, unfortunately. Now, this is not something new in the country at the time. I wasn't aware that this was going on, but it's not unknown that after injury in the country, if you're a law enforcement officer, that you don't necessarily get the supports and intervention that you need after injury. And it's something that our law enforcement officers are struggling with across the country. So it has been a battle the entire way. It took us about 5.5 years with attorneys and battling the state in order to get his care, basic care, put into place. So it's not automatic, unfortunately, after traumatic brain injury. You know, with traumatic brain injury, let's talk about that a minute. You don't necessarily see what's going on there. Okay, right? So if you're paralyzed, you're maybe in a wheelchair. If you're an amputee, they can see you're missing a limb. If you have a stroke, maybe there's some visual references that people can look at and see that you have a disability. But with brain injury, that's not always the case. You can look exactly the same or very near the same as you were before the incident or before the accident. And it's not sometimes apparent that you have a traumatic brain injury, right? So they look at you and they say, oh, you look okay to me. And exactly. Right? It's like a hidden type of injury because people cannot see it.
The invisible injury. And you're right, because people look at me and they say the same thing. You don't look like you have a brain injury. I say, yeah, but I do. What am I supposed to look like?
Right. Exactly. So that is part of the battle, right? It's a part of Brain Injury Awareness Month is getting out the word out there that just because you can't see somebody's injury doesn't mean they don't have one. They can have a significant injury if it's a brain injury and not be apparent when you first look at the person. So it's important that we respect our survivors of brain injury, and we don't discount when they tell us that they have issues. Okay, right? So we want to be able to respect what they have and also accept them the way they are now. I think it's really important to be very accepting. And I think hopeful, because even though, for example, my husband was not the same after injury, he came out with a complete personality change, and he has a lot of cognitive issues. And, you know, the exact person that left that morning did not return. However, God allowed him to live. And the person that came home is just as beautiful. And we love him just as much. And we have the opportunity here to help people with traumatic brain injuries, those that live through this injury, to really go out there and rebuild a new life. But what I think that we need more of is the supports and interventions so that they can do that.
Especially for our law enforcement personnel, first responders. We have 1 minute and a half to go before we go to the break for our first segment. I'll ask you a question when I come back. I'm going to give Jackie, my co-host, to respond to share some information. Jackie.
Yes, I was as I listened to you speak, the one thing that stood out most in what you said was, and I'd like you to elaborate on that a little bit more when we come back too, is to be a part of your own rescue. And that was a very powerful speech. I think a lot of people, they don't understand that everything is not always set in stone and paths are not always paved. And a lot of times you're going to have to do it yourself. And so I think that is awesome. And we want to hear a little bit more about that you have to be your own rescue.
Yeah. And when we get back from the break, I want to go into perhaps inviting Dr. K onto the Police Report First Responders Show, because our first responders, and particularly our law enforcement, do need the support and care that they so desperately deserve when something happens that they had no control over. So I think that'd be very important. So I'd like to invite her back to the Police Report First Responder Show every third Tuesday of the month. She don't have to come on every third Tuesday, but that's when the broadcast is. So we have 20 seconds before we go to the first break for this particular segment. Then we'll be back after the break. So ladies and gentlemen, keep it locked right here to Awesome Radio, 106.9 FM, WBISLP. Please don't forget, we are available on numerous apps, the App Store, Google Play, just to name a few. We'll be back in a moment, ladies and gentlemen.
My name is Jayla, and you're to see to my papa, Glenn Johnson, on the radio.
From the Pacific Justice Institute, this is The Legal Edge, defending your rights as a Christian, a parent, and a citizen. Here's Brad Dacus.
In the wake of the COVID pandemic, Pacific Justice Institute helped hundreds of thousands get relief for unreasonable mandates in violation of their faith. The fight still continues, though, as PJI's Texas staff attorney, Naomi Bang, is helping a medical student at the University of Texas who was prohibited from continuing her education simply because of her religious beliefs against the vaccine. Now, after Bang wrote to the university detailing the student's constitutional rights to religious accommodation, the university rescinded its decision, and the student can now continue in the program. PJI.org.
PJI provides legal representation without charge. Get exclusive email updates by registering for The Legal Insider at PJI.org.
A brain injury can change the way you think, act, move, and feel. More than 2.8 million children and adults sustain traumatic brain injuries in the United States each year, with many more going undiagnosed. If you or someone close to you has experienced a brain injury, call the Brain Injury Association at 1-800-444-6443 or visit their website at www.biausa.org. Get the help you need today.
Thank you for listening to WBISLP 106.9 FM, Awesome Radio.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Glenn Johnson Show, Motivation with Glenn. We did have a caller that called in, had a concern about the number not being scrolled across the screen. And then coming back on the air, I hit the button and ended the call for her. But if that caller would call back, I would certainly appreciate it, because I know you have a comment or a question. So we'll welcome your comment or question if you will give us a call back, and you'll be live on the air. I know Jackie had a question for our guest, Dr. K, regarding her husband. So without delay, I'm going to give it back over to Ms. Jacqueline Cullors Williams.
Yes, I just wanted to hear Dr. K elaborate on the powerful statement that she made about being your own rescue. And we have a caller, so we're going to, if we could just wait one moment after our caller, we will get back to Dr. K with those comments.
Caller, you are live on the air on the Glenn Johnson Show, Motivations with Glenn. You have a comment or question?
Hello. Why did you hang up?
I did that by accident. I'm so sorry.
Well, they speaking on the truth that transforms, and exactly right. The truth that transforms. Apostle Donna Foster.
I think you might be confused with the wrong show, ma'am. This is the Glenn Johnson Show, Motivation with Glenn. We're doing Brain Injury Awareness Month, and we have a special guest joining us, Dr. K, and sharing her story of her husband with his brain injury as he received at a traffic stop as a North Carolina
Okay, so I'm in the wrong department, wrong station. Well, I'm sorry.
No, you absolutely have the correct station, but the wrong show.
Okay, wrong show. Okay, well, thank you.
All right, sorry about that. I'm going to give it back over to Miss Jacqueline Collins-Williams.
Yes, Dr. K, we were discussing about being your own rescue. And I thought that was a very powerful statement that may help someone, regardless to if it's traumatic brain injury or any type of things where they're having to navigate the system for the first time concerning an injury or something that is life altering. Can you elaborate a little bit on that, being your own rescue?
Sure, absolutely. So I think even from the beginning, when my husband was injured, I assumed there was all of this outside support that was going to come in. I just assumed that somebody was going to come in and the support was going to be there. And then there was this shock that there wasn't support there. And I've heard this from other families with traumatic brain injury, that the follow-up care after they get home is not necessarily what they thought it would be. I just began to look at that in the situation, and I had a good friend of mine that I've had since 7th grade, Carla. Her name's Carla. And she sent me a letter one day, and she said, even if workers' compensation doesn't take care of this situation, God will. And I remember that was a pivotal moment for me, because I sat there and I was weeping over this letter, and I knew that God would, because we are Christians, we believe in God, and I just knew that God would take care of this. But it doesn't mean it was easy. But I began to look to see, what could I do to be a part of my own rescue? What could I do to be a part of our rescue? And so I decided to go back to school, and I obtained my BA and 2 master's degrees and my doctorate degree in the middle of all this, because I realized there was no research in the country on traumatic brain injury in law enforcement officers. And there was no research in the country really with law enforcement officers with any injury or on their caregivers. So what I mean about being a part of your own rescue, we cannot sit back and wait for help to arrive. Okay, friends, what if help does not arrive? First of all, know that God is always with you. You're not alone. And with God's help, you can rebuild regardless of whether anyone else arrives from the outside. I truly believe that through prayer, God can help you to lift yourself up out of whatever situation you might be in. So first of all, I want to say, no matter how hard it is where you are right now, God can help you to be a part of your own rescue. That means picking yourself up when you're down, encouraging yourself, I can do this, believing in yourself even when nobody else does. Start with something small. Do whatever you have to do in that particular day. Sometimes it's living in the moment. Don't look too far out to the future. Live right now. Do what you have at hand, whether or not it's taking care of your environment. I think it's really important to take care of ourselves, because we are the temple of the Holy Spirit, right? We are God's temple here. We have to take care of ourselves. Sometimes when we get in these situations where we did not want this, let's think about the cup that Jesus was given. And in the Garden of Gethsemane, he said, God, would you take this cup from me, but not my will, but yours. And God showed me during this whole process, there's a scripture in the Bible that Jesus gives us the example of what to do when we have a cup that we don't want. And whenever Jesus was getting ready to be betrayed, and it was just at hand, he said to his disciples, rise up, let us go. And when I saw that in the scripture, that to me is being a part. It's facing whatever is ahead of you, no matter what it is, head on. It's being a part of your own rescue in a way. Yes, Jesus had a there was a plan on Jesus's life from the beginning. But if we look at what we have and the example that Jesus gives us, that no matter what we are facing, that we can face it. And we also know that God is with us. And in that, we can do what we can do every single day to be a part of our own rescue. And sometimes that means that we need to ask for help. Some of us don't like to ask for help. And I think it's important to realize that sometimes we actually have to verbalize that we need help.
Absolutely. And Dr. K, what you just spoke about also falls on the lines of resilience, if I'm not mistaken. And resilience, you can look at your situation and say, this is really bad, and be stuck right there in that spot. Or you can pick yourself up and continue to move forward. Also, what you spoke about brings the scripture to mind, Joel chapter 20, verse 2, which states or says, God can restore what is broken and change it into something amazing. All you have to have is faith. May God have a blessing to the reading of his word. So God can change what is broken and change it into something amazing. Jackie?
Yes. I like how you talked about Jesus being our example and how even he needed help. In the Garden of Gethsemane, before he went to the cross, he prayed and said, Father, if it be thy will, let this cup pass from me. He had to seek the Father. And, the Bible even talks about how he was there praying and he sweat great drops of blood. But he went ahead and he went forward to do what he had to do, to be our Savior. And he went on to Calvary. And so I think it's a great example that it was used there, that he had to seek the Father's help. And sometimes we have to seek help for whatever it is that we're going through. And so I love how you brought that point out about seeking help. I wanted to say to you and ask you, what would you say to a new caregiver that is just now starting out and is going to have to take care of their loved one? There's a lot of people, I applaud you for doing it. There are actually people that won't do it. There are actually people that are not able to do it, or actually others that feel like they don't have the strength to do it. What would you say to a new caregiver concerning taking care of their loved one?
I think to begin with, I had no idea what I was getting into. And basically, that may be the exact same situation they're getting into. So take a deep breath if you're just starting this journey, because it can be a long one, but it can also be very encouraging. Yeah. This can be inspirational. This is not easy. First of all, I want to go back to the thing that says you're not alone. You're going to need help. Don't think that you're going to start this and begin this or even end this journey on your own. I think it's really important from the very beginning that you realize that you're going to need help with this. Also, it's really important as a caregiver to take care of yourself. Now, what I realized that for some time. It was several years before I realized that. So for a beginning caregiver, I think it's really important from the very beginning, that it's really important to take care of yourself.
And Dr. K, would you hold on until we go out to the break? I'll give you the opportunity to pick back up once we return from the break. Then we'll have 3 more 10-minute talk times, and that will conclude today's broadcast. So to keep it locked right here, ladies and gentlemen.
Awesome Radio 106.9 WBIS LP.
Love your neighbor as yourself. We've likely heard it hundreds of times in our lives, but how does that apply to motherhood? Hi, I'm Dana Gresh, founder of True Girl. The word neighbor in the command to love your neighbor as yourself literally means any other person. That includes your kids. This brings a question to mind, doesn't it? Do I love myself in godly ways? Depending on how you were raised or your personality, this might sound selfish to you. But when you joyfully embrace your identity in Christ and take care of yourself out of love for who God created you to be, something amazing happens. We're more likely to naturally overflow with healthy love for our kids. Loving our children out of our own healthy place is a valuable example of loving our neighbor as ourselves. For more tips on how to raise your kids, go to danagresh.com.
Many people with brain injury have their lives defined for them. This March, join the Brain Injury Association in celebrating the More Than My Brain Injury campaign and give individuals a chance to overcome those definitions by telling their own stories. For information about brain injury and how you can help raise awareness all month, visit www.biausa.org. That's biausa.org.
We're back. You're listening to The Glenn Johnson Show. You can reach Glenn at glennjohnsonshow@gmail.com.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Awesome Radio, 106.9 FM, WBISLP, Christian inspiration for the family and ministry teaching for practical Christian living. I'm not going to delay anything because Dr. K was giving a response to Jacqueline Collins Williams' question. I want to add to that question, and that is, Dr. K, what does a caregiver, him or herself, need to be a caregiver? Do they need any additional support or help?
So your question was, what does a caregiver need to be a caregiver? Was that the question?
I believe so, yes.
Well, you need a lot of, you're going to need a lot of patience. You know, mostly the people that we end up taking care of are people we love, right? It's our family members usually. And when you're a family caregiver, you already love that person beyond measure. And what becomes exhausting, I think, over time is just the day in and day out caregiving. So just the activities of daily living. So it's maybe the lack of sleep. Maybe it's not even have time. You don't even have time to eat yourself. You're processing. How do you get these, your loved one to the doctor's office, to all their appointments? You've got to get all their medications. You need to get them to all of their therapies. You need to make sure they're eating. You may be bathing them. You may be dressing them. There's a lot that goes along with it just for the regular living activities. And so what happens is with caregivers is they can tend to be burned out after time. So I talked with someone recently, and I want to share this resource to all the callers out there, because I realized recently that, I have my doctorate degree. I have all these degrees in this. I'm an ordained minister. I'm a certified spiritual Christian counselor. I'm a certified caregiver, life coach. But guess what? Dr. K. Reyna needs help. I can't do this by myself. And so I reached out to a resource that I want to share with everyone out there for caregivers specifically. And his name is Dave Nassany. And it's Dave, the caregiver's caregiver. And it's let me say that again, caregiverdave.com, caregiverdave.com. And I would suggest that new caregivers, this is perfect for you. Caregivers, if you've been doing this for years and years and years, this is perfect for you. I'm not getting paid to share this. I'm just saying this has been a wonderful resource that I found recently that I believe Dave can help caregivers, from beginning caregivers to caregivers that have been doing this for years and who actually may be burned out. And he said something to me on one of our calls. He said, when we get, let's say we have our car and we have a tank of gas. Okay, there are some people that fill up at halfway, right? And there are some people who don't even think about getting gas in the tank until they're on empty. But when you're a caregiver, it's important to start thinking about filling up when you're halfway. Don't let yourself get on empty, right? Because it's when caregivers get on empty that we have the issues with burnout. And then you're totally exhausted. You've not been taking care of yourself. And how can you possibly take care of anyone else if you've not taken care of yourself?
Yeah, and Dr. K, we have another caller calling in. Caller, you're live on the air on Awesome Radio. This is the Glenn Johnson Show. Motivation with Glenn. Do you have a comment or question? Caller, are you there?
This the Truth Ministry?
No, ma'am.
I got the wrong number again. I'm sorry.
No, you have the correct number, but the wrong show. So call me. You have to check your schedule, find out when they're on, and you'll call in during their show. And if you can email me, I'll give you the information and provide you with all the necessary documents you need for that broadcast. Okay, ma'am? Thank you. But listen out. I'll give you my email address if you write it down, and I will assist you with connecting with the correct show. My email address is Glenn, Glenn, Johnson Show at gmail.com. Once again, Glenn Johnson Show at gmail.com, and I will provide you with the necessary information. Back over to Dr. K.
Absolutely, Glenn. Before I move on from Dave Nassany and his caregiverdave.com, I want to say that he gives out free consultations. So you can go right to his website and a time to meet with Dave absolutely free, and he talks to you by phone. And it was such a blessing to my heart, and he actually prayed for me before we got off the call, and I really felt like it helped me tremendously. So I just wanted to share that resource with caregivers out there.
Yeah, and speaking of caregivers, we have 4 minutes to go before we go to the next break. Then we'll have 2 more 10-minute talk times when we return. So I just want to mention at this time, my co-host, Ms. Jacqueline Cummins-Williams, is also a caregiver, and perhaps we can get both of you to provide information to our listening audience. And I'll begin with Ms. Jacqueline Cummins-Williams.
Yes, I'm a caregiver, but in a different section. And so some of the things I'm a little bit more familiar with concerning traumatic brain injuries and some of the effects that it can have upon the individual and caring for them. So some of my questions are going to be very absolutely direct concerning it. And I was going to ask Dr. Patricia K and this one is not on my list, but I'm going to ask her this. I wanted her to talk to us about having to learn to live with a different person all over again after the brain injury.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. And I'm not going to take too much of our time to answer that, but I just want to add into that, and perhaps we'll touch on this before we leave the broadcast today, and that is labeling your emotions. Dr. K, I think you were on the virtual support group meeting when that was mentioned, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to answer the question that Ms. Jacqueline Cummins-Williams has asked.
Absolutely. So that's very difficult, right? It's very difficult because the person that you love may have changed substantially, right? So, I'm going to say, how did I do it personally? I cried a lot. I did. I made it through the first year pretty good. I was on, I would say, in crisis mode the first year. And, when women are in crisis mode, we can do anything. We're mothers, we're women, we take care of our families. And so I cried a lot. There's a lot of grief. So that gets to the process of grief. I mean, you're really grieving the person you've lost. Actually, and also we love this person that we're taking care of. And we also suffer when somebody that we love is suffering. So how did I do this? And we also have children. It was very, very difficult on the children. It's very hard. You just have to keep going. A lot of prayer. I think it's really important to let your emotions out. It's really important to let yourself grieve. It's important to acknowledge that how you feel is okay and to allow yourself to feel the way you feel. Sometimes we try to hide what we feel, bottle it up, and we don't let it out. And it's very unhealthy to do that. So how did I learn how to do that? Well, you just most of the time we're taking care of someone we already love, and that love just carries over in a different way. And you learn how to accept that person just the way they are now, knowing that, to me, in my own beliefs, I believe God allowed my husband to stay for some reason. He's not here for no reason. He's here for a reason. If this had not happened, and I'm not saying I'm thankful for it, I still, not saying that. I am thankful for the people I have met across the country afterwards. I am thankful for the connections I've made. I wouldn't be on this show today. I wouldn't know Dr. Glenn and Dr. Williams. I wouldn't know you if this had not happened. It's not easy. Okay? Let's just say it like it is. This is not easy. Taking care of someone with traumatic brain injury is the most difficult thing I've ever done in my entire life. And I think that if it's difficult, if you're having a very difficult day, I think it's really important to bring it back down to the moment. Don't look at the what ifs. Don't look way out into the future and say what's going to happen even tomorrow, next week, next year, next month. That is very overwhelming. bring it back to the very moment and time that you're in, and take a deep breath and think, I'm okay right now. Everything's okay right now. Bring it back to the moment and do this. Guys, you have to do this 1 minute at the time, 1 moment at the time, 1 second at the time if you must, but don't give up. And it goes back to taking care of yourself, showing yourself some love and some self-love and support, because you may not be receiving the same type of reciprocal behaviors back from the person you love now that you did have before.
Hey,
Those situations.
keep it locked right here, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back in a moment.
Keep it locked right here to the Glenn Johnson Show.
Singing for joy. Revelation 21:4 says, there will be no more tears, no more sorrows, and no more pain. And 1 John 3:2 says, we'll be in the presence of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Remember that song, When We All Get to Heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. And that's what we'll all do. So today, get excited about heaven. And when others see your joy, they may ask about and want the very same thing. This is Moving Moments. Now it's your time to make a move.
If you've experienced a brain injury, you are not alone. For help, call the Brain Injury Association today at 1-800-444-6443. 1-800-444-6443. Visit their website at biausa.org.
We are the station that provides inspiration for the family and ministry teaching for practical Christian living. Awesome Radio.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Awesome Radio, 106.9 FM. WBISLP. I was contemplating, or rather I should mention this to Dr. K and to my co-hosts. So after careful consideration, I decided to narrow it down. And Dr. K, I just want to tell you briefly, there were some other brain injury caregivers that wanted to join you on today's broadcast. But we have decided to have you do your story and your information solo. So now I would like to ask if those people that wanted to be on with today with Dr. K, if they're listening, and I know they are, or if they're watching on Facebook Live, if you would kindly call in, offer a comment or question. The number to call is 252-756-2008. We'll be standing by waiting for your call. I'm going to give it back over to my co-host and Dr. K.
Dr. K, were you finished with your last comment before I break?
Yes. Thank you so much.
So I wanted to ask you about, in taking care of a person with a traumatic brain injury, keeping things organized and maintaining their routine, because I know these things are very important with a person that has a traumatic brain injury.
Absolutely. Routine is very, right there, the routine can make your day so much better. So there are a lot of resources out there that will explain to you how to make your home environment as simple as possible for the person you're caring for. Very often after a brain injury, someone with brain injury has a lot of issues dealing with a lot going on in the environment. They become overwhelmed. It can be even with light, sound, and just way too many things going on, even people talking, the TV, having clutter, anything that's as cluttered. I remember that after my husband was injured, one time I came home and he had stuffed everything of mine in the closet. Okay, so it was like he couldn't deal with all the things in the environment. So you mentioned the routine. So that's important, because if it's really important for them to know what they're doing and when they're doing it. Some people use a whiteboard, and they would list on the whiteboard what they're having today, their schedule, A, B, C, D, all the way down what their schedule is. When it's time to actually leave to go to an event, I always say, okay, we have 10 minutes to load now. We have now 5 minutes to load now. We have now 3 minutes to load now. Now we're driving out of the driveway in 1 minute, in order to just give a constant prompting of helping them to get themselves together and to make it out. So, a lot of noise in our environment. I didn't realize this until after my husband was injured. If you go out now and you don't have a brain injury, and you just think about this, when you go out, listen to all the music that's out there. This loud music is in restaurants, it's at the grocery store. For heaven's sakes, now it's at the gas pump. And this is very overwhelming for people, or can be overwhelming for people with traumatic brain injury. Fireworks at the 4th of July, all of those loud noises, all of those things that you have to keep in mind if you're caring for somebody with a brain injury, that you kind of want to take them to quieter environments, especially to begin with. It takes a very long time to rebuild, to be able to do all of those things again.
You hit the nail right on the head when you said the music at the gas station. I cannot tolerate that loud music at the gas station. And I'm trying to pump my gas. I'm not trying to hear a particular artist and their song. I'm trying to get my gas and go. And it's just extremely loud. So you're absolutely right, Doc. I just thought about when you mentioned it, because that just happened to me yesterday. That thing was so loud at the pump. I'm like, I wanted to stop pumping the gas just so I can get away from the music.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And but music therapy itself is an integral part of brain injury, and for any kind of medical condition, stroke, Alzheimer's, dementia, music therapy is a very important part of that now. More and more medical institutions and facilities are resorting to music therapy included in a patient's treatment.
Absolutely. And, in addition to music therapy, the other thing that's, I think, very therapeutic is adaptive sports. Adaptive sports are fantastic. That's one of the things we've rebuilt our lives on, is adaptive sports. It doesn't matter what type of disability you have. There's an adaptive sport out there that you can do. And also it helps you to be a part of your community again. Many times people with traumatic brain injury, they struggle with friendships because it's not the person with the traumatic brain injury. Many times it's the people that knew them before who no longer can handle the situation. You have friends that cannot deal with the differences. But I can tell you this, you can make brand new friends through adaptive sports. Is a great way to do that and build community. And an organization I just want to throw out that helps people do that is the Challenged Athletes Foundation. So that's Challenged Athletes Foundation. I would suggest that everyone listening, that if you have any type of disability at all, to look them up on the internet. They have all kinds of events, and they are wonderful, beautiful people, and you can rebuild community and family that way.
And Doctor, with 4 minutes ago before this particular segment, before we go to the break, I just want to reiterate, based upon what you said earlier, that gave me the project to do research on how does our law enforcement first responders get the help they need when something occurs that they had no control over. So I'm definitely going to research that, and I'm going to talk to Coach Vernon Garrison, who's also hosts the Police Report First Responder Show with me, to have you back on the show to talk about that, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Because I think all of our listening audience need to know, and particularly our law enforcement community, and I think that's a good place for you to share that information and see how we can get help for these law enforcement officers, first responders, at a time of need. We have 3 minutes to go before we go to the break. Jackie.
I was going to say to that, even to what you were speaking of, Dr. Glenn and Dr. K, is that change in establishment happens from places of deficit. A lot of times when there is a need, that's where the foundations and organizations spring up from. And so I'm glad that that is one of the things that is being talked about on this show, is getting the help for other people. Right. And it has to start with a deficit. If there's no need, then there's no place for there to be help. Help comes from where there's a need.
Yeah, because when people recognize the need, then that's when all the help comes forward.
Yes. Dr. K spoke of, and she was actually speaking of triggers and overstimulation. I wanted to say, and she didn't use those exact words, but that's what she was speaking about. I wanted to say here, and just throw this in as a part of her speaking to us, is one of the things that I've learned dealing with a traumatic brain injury is that symptoms show up at any time. And even though you may have a schedule and you may have a plan, things don't always go as you plan. You have to often stop and deal with those particular triggers or overstimulation or whatever it is that is happening at that time, right in that moment. So I wanted her to talk to us about being flexibility and being flexible as a provider, a care provider.
Thank you for asking that. Absolutely. So I call this plan A, plan B, and no plan at all. So this happens, all the time, right? So you go out, you have this great plan in place, and that doesn't work. So you go to plan B, and then you just say, okay, let's just get there one way or the other. So you know what? This happens all of the time, and I think it's really important. I think you've hit on something there. You really do have to be flexible in this. You cannot be inflexible. You have to work around whatever's going on at the time. And you're right. Whenever someone with a traumatic brain injury, I mean, you never know what is going to upset or your trigger. There's lots of triggers I could come up with 1,000 triggers that go on that I'm on constant surveillance for, right? Because you never know what's going to trigger. And there could be brand new triggers that you've not seen before, depending on what kind of environments you're in. So depending on how much wherever you go, you can find a new trigger. I think it's really important you've got to really have a lighthearted attitude. Try to laugh about some of these things. I mean, my thing is we're going to either laugh about it or we're going to cry about it. So I'd rather laugh about it as much as we can about these things and move on. I mean, what is so funny is I make as many mistakes sometimes as he does. I'm out doing all kinds of crazy stuff all the time because my mind is in so many places trying to take care of him. And we just have to laugh when we do these things because life is not going to be perfect.
Keep it locked right here to the Glenn Johnson Show. Motivation with Glenn. This is Awesome Radio, 106.9 FM.
1 in 3 adults in America have pre-diabetes, but most don't know it. To let people know it can be reversed before it becomes type 2 diabetes, professional basketball player Julius Randle is doing everything in reverse.
I'm only dunking with reverse windmills. I drove the whole way to practice in reverse. I don't recommend it. This move's called the reverse shuffle. I do recommend it. And it took me months to learn how to speak in reverse, like this. Here's 10 almost for diabetes type 2 with living Ben has mama. In other words, my mom has been living with type 2 diabetes for almost 10 years. So together, we want to say to the 84 million Americans at risk, exercise and healthy eating can help reverse prediabetes. Start by taking a simple 1-minute risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Brought to you by the Ad Council and its pre-diabetes awareness partners.
Bet he can't say that in reverse.
March is Brain Injury Awareness Month. Learn more about brain injury by calling the Brain Injury Association at 1-800-444-6443. 1-800-444-6443. Visit their website at biausa.org.
My name is Jayla, and you're to see to my papa, Glenn Johnson, on the radio.
Welcome back to the broadcast, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to Awesome Radio, 106.9 FM. WBISLP. We have reached our final 10 minutes of today's broadcast. So I want to just share something with everybody and to give it back over to my co-host and Dr. K. When Dr. K mentioned adaptive sports, I always wanted to mention sports and now relates to our young school-aged children and concussions. It is very important that you monitor your child if they're playing sports and they're school age, because a concussion can lead to other things with brain injuries. Number one thing is CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Because why that's important? Because if your child is playing sports, get so many concussions, and develop CTE, he's not going to know, or she's not going to know, or you're not going to know that they have CTE, because CTE could only be diagnosed once you're dead and they perform an autopsy. So that's why that's relatively important. I'm going to give the remainder of the time, which is 8 minutes, to my co-host and Dr. K.
Yes, Dr. K was talking about flexibility, and I like how she said plan A, plan B, and then no plan. Talk to us about no plan, Dr. K.
No plan at all, right? You just have to wing it at that point, right? So and I go back to what caregiver Dave told me. He said, you plan the best you can. All right. You just plan the best you can. Right. Or plan for the worst and hope for the best. Okay. You do your very best. That's all we can do. I think it's really important as caregivers that we don't beat up on ourselves when our plans don't go our way. If anything's going on, everything will. And I think it's important just to keep on going. You just got to try to laugh about it. You fix it. Okay. And don't beat up on yourself. If something went wrong that day and you weren't the perfect person or the perfect caregiver and the perfect plan didn't happen, because let me just tell you right now, it's not going to. I often say that it's me, my husband, and a 3-ring circus, which is the brain injury. But we can still get out there in the world and do things. And I wanted to talk just a few minutes about my research. So my research was the first research in the country to include injured law enforcement, caregivers of injured law enforcement officers and caregivers of firefighters with traumatic brain injury. There was no research in the country. So my research within my doctoral program was absolutely groundbreaking. I'm thrilled to say that I was able to put our catastrophically injured law enforcement officers and firefighters with TBI in the research in the form of having their caregivers in this study. And at the present moment, I am currently employed with the Center on Brain Injury Research and Training out of the University of Oregon. And I have some very exciting research that's in the works on the prevalence of concussion, TBI, among our first responder population in the country, because we do not know what the prevalence of traumatic brain injury concussion is among our law enforcement officers or other first responders. So it's really important that we do this research so that we can have a foundation to say, why do we need supports and interventions? Like you said before, if there isn't a deficit, we won't feel it. There has to be something that starts why we need these services. So I think it's really important to get this research out there and going. And I just want to say, if you drink coffee, that One Nation Coffee has during the month of March for Brain Injury Awareness Month, they are supporting this research by donating a portion of their coffee proceeds to CBERT specifically for this research, which is very exciting. Talk about being a part of your own rescue. Sometimes there is no funding in the entire country, which is what I found for this specific research. So that my family actually donated the first funding to start the research in honor of my husband, North Carolina Master Trooper Umberto Reyna, in honor of him and his sacrifice and his service to the country, protecting us right here at home for the citizens of North Carolina. So I'm thrilled that my family was able to do that, but we cannot do that alone. So I found this organization through an adaptive golf event. Michelle and John are beautiful people, beautiful company, and they agreed during Brain Injury Awareness Month to give a part of their proceeds to CBERT and also to Blue. And so if you drink coffee, this is your way, one coffee cup at a time at onenationcoffee.com.
Yeah, and I just want to mention also, when you talked about our first responders here in North Carolina now, first responders also include our dispatchers, communications, or sheriff's office communicators. So first responders in North Carolina do include our emergency dispatcher 911 system and sheriff's office communicators. So definitely do the research on that, and I can't wait to see it. Jackie, we have 4 minutes to go for this podcast.
4 minutes. I have one last question, and I wanted to ask Dr. K. Reyna, do you ever stop praying? Is there ever a time to stop praying for healing? Do you continue to hope, and do you continue to pray for his healing?
Oh, absolutely. I don't believe it's over till God says it is. This is not over. God can do anything in a blink of an eye. Guys, we know that. God goes above and beyond every single time what we can even imagine. So I truly believe that healing is possible. I never stop praying for that. I also believe that our journeys here are no mistake. God already knew what was going to happen. I just have to say really quick, I know we're running out of time, but the very weekend before my husband was injured, God reminded me that weekend of everything he'd ever done for us. It just kept scrolling through my head, and I did not understand why. I didn't know what was going on. And I happened to be at an event with someone I'd never roomed with, and I testified to how wonderful God was the whole weekend. And then first thing Monday morning, my husband was injured, but God wrapped his arms around me and I was completely at peace.
Yeah.
You know, the people I work with said, I've never seen anybody more peaceful. You know, not a surprise to God. What's happened is not a surprise to God. It is not over yet. I truly believe through research, through God, through all of us on earth, we are God's hands and feet. We are Jesus here walking, that we can make miracles happen. That also is a part of being our own rescue, but also in rescuing other people. We have to be Jesus walking here, doing what we can do to help other people who cannot advocate or help themselves right now. That doesn't mean they won't be healed and won't come out of this. They may just do that. It is not over. So I think the important thing is to have hope.
Yeah, and before I give that final 2 minutes over to Miss Jackie Collins Williams, I want to say, Dr. K, I want to thank you for joining us today and sharing your story and your information with us. It's certainly appreciated. You put me on a mission to do some research on helping our first responders, and particularly our law enforcement officers and firefighters, in the event that something should happen. Is there support and help for them? So that's a very important matter, and I'm going to take on that responsibility and do the adequate research and share it with everybody. But before I go to Jackie, I want to also say, please don't forget, and we look forward to having you on the Police Report First Responder Show. We'll get in touch with you. Jackie.
I wanted to say thank you, Dr. K, for coming on and sharing your story with us. I also wanted to say, and just let everybody know, and just end this broadcast with a scripture and encourage you that continue to pray and continue to hope and to continue to believe for healing concerning your person. Isaiah 53:5, for he was wounded for our transgression, he was bruised for our iniquity. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. And so we can claim that and continue to believe that we can be healed through Jesus Christ. And so we're thankful for our broadcast on today and all that we've learned today. Dr. Glenn, I'm going to turn it back over to you just to say goodbye.
I know, and before I say goodbye, I'm going to go back over to Dr. K and thank her once again for being here. And I'll give her some closing words, 50 seconds.
I'd also like to share, please contact me. You can contact me at krayna@cbirt.org. That's krayna@cbirt.org. You can email me there. I also have other resources that I can share with caregivers. Thank you, Dr. Glenn, for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your show, and I look forward to being on another show with you.
Absolutely. I want to thank you so very much. I'll email you later because I might want some of those resources as well. My email address is glennjohnsonshow@gmail.com. I want to thank everybody for being here today. Thank our listening audience for listening in. And as always, it's awesome radio is not on your radio. Your radio just isn't on. We'll see you in the next broadcast. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. God bless everybody. Have a safe day. Thank you so much.